Aloha e komamai. Welcome to session 4 of the Inner Peace series. We are very, very excited today because we are addressing fear. And we have a very special guest all the way from Japan. We have the Reverend Dr. Daiho Saito. I'd like to introduce him, so if you could give me a little bit of time to do that, because he's got a very impressive background. He graduated from the Hamamatsu University School of Medicine in Japan, and he received his MD in psychiatry. He had some doubts about being a doctor, so he started practicing Buddhism and found a path to infinite enlightenment called Hoke Samadhi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. At the time he realized that he really wanted was not to just master psychiatry, but to learn more basic things as a human being. So in other words, to clearly understand the true self. Same thing that we are studying in the Gandhi, King, and Nonviolence class, being true to yourself, not only inwardly, but outwardly as well. So after that, the Reverend Dr. Saito practiced the chanting as much as he could every day. At first, it was a practice for himself, but eventually he began to consult with people about different types of problems. So many of them were in the areas other than psychiatry. So, for example, interpersonal problems, lawsuits, financial difficulties, spiritual problems, so on and so forth. After that, his desire to be involved in social issues became even stronger. So he is practicing ahimsa, from what we have learned from Gandhi, really practicing that compassion. From 2006 to 2008, he stayed in Cambodia and worked as a temple monk, building reservoirs, constructing roads, and maintaining schools. The idea was to work with people from other Asian countries to eventually form another economic system separate from the current economic globalization. So he's an advocate and a community builder, quite literally community builder at that level. And then after that, he went back to Japan and began to make connections with people working in various fields in medicine, global environmental issues, agriculture, and education. Eventually, many people with addiction, depression, anxiety, and other disorders began to visit the center. In addition to Buddhism, he began to study psychiatry and psychology again. Buddhism is still relevant today, or perhaps the time has finally come for us to understand the depths and the true merits of Buddhism and the connection between spirituality and science, right? What he found out was that many of the people who are suffering from addiction had been severely traumatized from childhood, like abuse, neglect, and overeducation, the pressures of life. The trauma is the foundation of their suffering and difficulty in living. In order to alleviate this, they seek pleasure from alcohol, escaping through drugs, gambling, and even sex. In this case, trying to eliminate only the symptom that appear on the surface will not work. In a sense, alcohol and other drugs are necessary in the current situation. The fundamental solution is to heal the trauma that underlies the symptoms, and above all, to find something that truly fulfills them. Then the root of suffering and anguish can be released. That is why for many of the people he worked with, the key method is observation of the mind and meditation. They come to him for a clear and effective method of meditation. In the therapeutic meditation, the patient's distress and underlying trauma are reflected in the body and the mind, like a mirror. So that is part of impressive backgrounds that the Reverend Dr. Daiho Saito has experienced and had shared with us. And we are truly, truly honored. Yoroshiku onegai itashimasu, Saito sensei.
ありがとうございます。Nice to meet you. I'm very happy to meet you, all of you. But first, I can pray, okay? 3 minutes. Hi. Yes, I would like to pray for you, your health and peace, safety of each land or world peace. Or only 3 or 5 minutes only. Yes, please. If you can chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, please chant together, or hearing, okay, up to you. Thank you so much. Today's theme is liberation from fear and anxiety. When I watched the video of the first class of this practice and learning course titled Inner Peace, Professor Joy introduced the secret to cultivating inner peace by His Holiness the Dalai Lama at here. So this video is short, but I think it is a great combination of ancient wisdom of Buddhism and modern science, and yet it is easy to understand. This moved me the most lately, and since I had just uploaded it to my FB page, I felt a kind of synchronicity that made me happy. If I express in a few words the main points of what His Holiness said, This would be my interpretation. 1. From self-centeredness to altruism. Exhibit the spirit of compassion and cultivate altruistic behavior. I totally agree with these words because I believe that this is the key to breaking through the various suffering, division, and conflicts in the world today, and leading to overall peace. Today, I would like to try to expand on this with my knowledge as a former psychiatrist and now as my current role as a Buddhist monk of the Lotus Sutra, and with the wisdom I have gained through practical and lived experience. In order for all altruistic behavior to spread in a healthy way among people, the following must be realized as a prerequisite. 2. Liberation from fear and anxiety, the underlying trauma. I would like to emphasize first that the answer is today's theme is the realization of two and the emergence of one in the hearts of all of you gathered here today. In other words, the actual opening and shining of the flowers in each of your hearts is the very answer to today's theme. Perhaps reference session 3 to connect the topics. That human relationships, social economic systems, and civilization itself create through the brain system. The above is a persistent stimulus and difficult to avoid. The economic system continues to increase stress by creating a competitive society with no end in sight. Trauma influences the present thoughts and emotions and continue to create more suffering, and the memories of the distress generated are further pulled in the amygdala, creating a vicious cycle. Amygdala is one region of our brain and the center that pulls memories of emotions such as anxiety, fear, and anger, and triggers the stress response. In addition, especially in today's information society, the vortex of fear-inducing information coming from the media and the social networking sites continues to overstimulate us modern people. In other words, the fear system centered in the amygdala is in a state of hypersensitivity. The bulwark of reason is often easily exceeded by the flood created by the interaction between the information that stimulates fear and desire so much, and we are caught up in it and pushed forward, even more so if there is trauma. So if our consciousness, which is buzzing with fear and anxiety, can be truly healed and unified, our daily life will naturally become better and more fulfilling. Intentional manipulation by reason and thought is difficult because of the structure and function of the brain. This shows the relationship between the prefrontal cortex, and which is the center of reason, thought, etc., and the amygdala. The amygdala is the center of the pool's memories of emotions such as anxiety, fear, and anger, and triggers the stress response. Although it is a small tissue the size of an almond, it is the center of a very important, powerful system that can command the entire brain to quickly detect life-threatening situations and quickly get ready to avert a crisis, prioritizing all other things. And the number of nerve fibers going from prefrontal cortex is much greater than the number of fibers going from the frontal cortex to amygdala. In other words, the amygdala is structurally superior to the frontal cortex, which is a place of reason. This is precisely one of the reasons why it is so difficult or impossible for us to control or suppress our such feelings, fear, anxiety, anger, through reason, international manipulation, or image creation. In recent years, meditation has attracting a great deal of attention as a way of overcoming this problem, and its effects have been proven to some extent. However, this does not mean that is enough, because when we think about the economic system and information society that will continue to stimulate our brains more and more, what we need in the future is to further improve the quality of meditations. In other words, there is a need for a method practice can truly heal and deeply wounded and exhausted mind of those who are forced to live in such harsh times, restore the power of life, and allow peace and joy to gush fundamental power of life like a fountain. The power and wisdom that emerge from this must lead to the creation of a truly happy, peaceful people and society. It must not be a matter of self-satisfaction of comfort. Yes. Today, I would like to attempt to propose a clear answer to this question of the present and future. Among these meditation methods, chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo as a method of mental and physical health is a practice that has been so effective in Japan since ancient times, not only for specialists such as monks, but also for many ordinary people. And today I am working on it by integrating Buddhism, psychology, and medicine. I believe that the Buddhist explanation for this was given by Reverend Yamamura, the chief priest of Honolulu Myohoji Temple. But if I describe it simply in modern terms, it would be as follows. Chanting practice is not a meditation method that strives to open our inherent personal potential by exploring our personal mind. It is a cosmic meditation, infinite meditation that seeks to restore the power of original life by connecting to the infinite awareness of the Buddha who mastered the world of the mind and receiving its contents of awareness. If we use electricity as an analogy, instead of generating our own power, the way we try to do things on our own is often exhausting, and there is a limit to what we can receive in terms of quantity and quality. We are trying to realize a more fulfilling life by receiving a supply from a large power storage facility. In this case, the infinite power storage facility is the eternal Buddha or his Dharma name, Myoho Renge Kyo itself. To get electrical energy, you have to plug it into an outlet. In the same way, it is important that we first connect to the eternal Buddha. That is what Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is all about. Perhaps a brief reminder about what Namu Myoho Renge Kyo means, referring to the second session. In order to receive more energy and clarity, we must increase our concentration and chant to the point of becoming one with Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Then all merits of Buddha's compassion and wisdom will be clearly downloaded to us. As an example for brain science research on chanting, according to an experimental study by Dr. Hideo Arita, Professor Emeritus of Toho University School of Medicine, which measured EEG and blood flow in the prefrontal cortex during sutra reading or chanting. An increase in blood flow in the prefrontal cortex means that the serotonin nerve is activated and a calm mental state is naturally produced. This is called by the EEG as an alpha-2 brain wave. Cerebral blood flow increase more than in sutra reading or breathing exercise, but especially during chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, the increase in blood flow is quite large. One, with the feeling of being enveloped by the great compassion of the Buddha or Dharma, rather than through self-initiated efforts alone. At that time, we are healed. Two, a stable state of mind is realized. And next, three, release the trauma that is the root of feeling of fear and anger. And four, allow the true self to emerge from the depths of the mind. And five, conversion to wisdom. From anxiety, fear, and anger to peace of mind, satisfaction, compassion, and mutual help behavior. All of above can be done naturally without the use of intentional manipulation. This is a feature of chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge はい、ありがとうございました。Thank you so much. はい。
Before we start with the translation, I just wanted to also introduce a very important person here. We have Dean Makinodan. He has a master's degree in counseling. He has over 30 years of translation and interpretation experience, and he has been more than gracious to allow us his expertise or provide us with his expertise. So for the question and answer that I'm expecting everyone to participate and join in.
So you know when we're doing the Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, we're praying to Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh.
そうですから先生、一応質問ですけど、南妙法蓮華経を唱えるとき、仏様へのお祈りですかっていう、一応確認でした。
仏様への祈りといいますか、なんていうんですかね、それ自体が南無妙法蓮華経そのものが仏様の心を表しているわけですね。ブッダの悟りあるいは心を表している。それと私たちが一つになるということが大切だということなんですね。はい、何のために祈るというよりも私たちがまず一つになる。
なるほど。
はい。
Yes, so your observation, thank you, Sensei. どうも先生、ありがとうございました。As you have pointed out, yes, it is a prayer to the Buddha. However, more important is that Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is manifesting the Buddha himself, the Buddha itself. So more than praying to the Buddha, what is important is that we become one. We become one with the Buddha. So again, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the Buddha himself itself. ありがとうございました。
I have a follow-up question regarding that. Unless Lahela, do you have another question?
No, I was gonna say that too. Like I could tell by his sound, like he was calling out to, like when he was doing that, like felt like he was calling out to somebody. So I guess that's Buddha, yeah.
なるほど。先生、ラヘラさんのコメント、質問は、先生がお題目唱えながら、なんとなく、彼女が感じたこと、仏様への、呼び出しというかですね、の感じが受けました。だからそのコメントがありました。
確かにその通りですね。その通りです。私とブッダがこう南無妙法蓮華経を通してつながるわけですね。そういう意味では確かに仏様へ、私の心、そうすると仏様から私の方へというここに、交流が起こっているわけなんです。特に最後の方ね、最後の方は。
なるほど。はい。ありがとうございました。Yes, so it's exactly, as you had observed, more than again the prayer, it is, as you have observed, the act of calling out to the Buddha is part of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, but more importantly is the Buddha and the person chanting are joining, are coming or communicating, merging together through Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So that is an important aspect of this chanting, that the merging of the Buddha and the person who chants is this coming together, this unity is being formed in Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So that the energies of these two parties are connecting.
Yes. Hi. So my question will be, when he prays, is it imagining the Buddha as a being, or it's more like the Buddha nature, and then it's trying to kind of combine our Buddha nature as humans with the Buddha nature that was preached, or is it more the character of Buddha, Gautama Buddha?
Yeah, thank you for the question. 南無妙法蓮華経のそういう実行されているとき、仏様としての人格との一体になるか、また仏様の、仏性というか、との一体になるんでしょうか。そしてそれは人間の人格と仏様の人格か、その仏性と人間性というか、が一緒になるか。そういう、質問というか確認というか。
はい、そうですね。そのあたりはブッダがお釈迦様がおっしゃってるんですが、仏性という言葉でもいいんです。もちろんですから、その仏性が非常にはっきりと現れた姿がブッダなわけですね。ですからブッダとなると仏性とブッダという人格がもうほとんどそのままイコールになるわけです。ちょっと言い方がちょっと言葉のあれがちょっと違うかもしれませんが、ブッダがおっしゃるのは我を見る者は仏法、法を見る、法を見る者は我を見る。ですからブッダの場合はダルマとその人間としてのブッダがイコールなんですね。そこまでその状態がそもそもブッダなわけですね。こんなところでいかがでしょうか。
わかりました。じゃあ、シェアしてみます。 So, the Reverend Doctor is saying is that you have Buddha nature and you have the Buddha, but you might say the consummation of Buddha nature is the Buddha. So, you say the character of the Buddha, but that's the consummated form of Buddha nature. And in the same way, when you speak about Buddhism and the Buddha's teaching, or you might say what you call the Dharma, and the Dharma is synonymous with the Buddha. In other words, the Buddha's teaching has become the Buddha. So there is a kind of synchronicity, especially in the form of the Buddha. All are consummated in the Buddha, his teaching, and also his Buddha nature, or the Buddha nature of all things. はい、伝えてきました。ありがとうございました、先生。
ありがとう。
In our inner peace session, we're not trying to proselytize or trying to convert everybody to Buddhism, but to teach them about the benefits of meditation. How do we then integrate Nam-myoho Renge Kyo if we're not necessarily Buddhist? How does that benefit us, and marry those two things so that we can benefit from it regardless of our faith belief system?
先生、この授業の目的は、特に仏教徒になるため、また仏教あれですか、その道を進めるための授業じゃないので、他の信仰を持つ方々、いかにこの南妙法蓮華経のその行を自分の日常生活に取り入れるか、またはあれですか、その全体を利益を与えるというかことはできるでしょうか。特にこの場合は仏教徒の方はじゃなく、やっぱり他の宗教を持ちながらですね、こういう利益はどう日常生活を取り入れるでしょうか、ベネフィットというか、その質問です。
はい。ですね、この南無妙法蓮華経と唱えるということは、仏教徒に特になる必要はないと思います。仏教徒であろうとするを名乗る必要はない。つまり、どのような宗教あるいは宗教を持たないという人であったとしても、この南無妙法蓮華経を唱えるということは、そのことによってその人の生活とか人生にこれが活かせればいいということです。それが一番実は本当に大切なことだと私は思っているんです。ですからどこかの宗教団体に属するとか信仰で行うとかということではなくて、それよりもむしろ私たちの先ほど申しましたように人生とか生活に生かす、この南無妙法蓮華経たったこれだけで良いわけですから、これを生かすことができれば私はとてもいいと思っているんです。はい、
ありがとうございます。通訳していきます。So the Reverend Doctor is saying that it is not important to become or to be a Buddhist. What the Reverend Doctor wanted to share today is that the benefits of practicing Nam-myoho Renge Kyo in your lives. They are benefits that you can receive. You do not have to be a Buddhist to receive these benefits, or you do not have to be a Buddhist to chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. But he believes that there are benefits that you can experience and will receive in daily life by adding this to your practices.
So I noticed from the mental process through chanting picture, I was wondering what is defined as a true heart. I think that was a step before conversion to wisdom.
Great question.
そうです。先ほどの図面ですけど、true heart という部分が出ておりましてですね、true heart。で、その true heart の意味とは何ですかっていう質問でした。
true heart？
true heart、本当の心。
true heart。
誠の心。
はいはい。はい。
あの、
誠
self ですか。
心とは何か。
はい。そういう質問です。
そうですね。
はい。
ここは非常に難しいところでもありますね。説明するとなると。はい。実は今のところでも、実はこのプラクティスの中でもやってたんですが、私は唱えながらだんだん、おそらく皆さんと共有しながら、皆さんの潜在意識の深いところへ深いところへと、アプローチしていくような形だったんです。それはそしてその本当に私たちの心の元みたいなものが実は私たちが持っていると、それが実は先ほどおっしゃった仏性でもあるわけですね。ところが私たちは、いろんな体験をしていく中で、体験を通していろんなことを学んで、これはああいうものだ、こういうものだというものが私たちの中に出来上がって、それが繰り返されて習慣になります。このことを私たちだと思っているわけなんですけれども、私たちのキャラクター。でも、これって作られたものです。ですから、それを一旦どんどんなんていうか、覗くわけではないですけど、そういったものを通り越して、もっと奥深い私たちの心のところへ来ると、奥深い心の世界に入っていくと、本当の原点の私たちの心というのが現れ出てくるようになるわけです。実際にはその時にはっきりわかると思います。そのために唱えていると言っていいわけなんですね。はい。私たちと別ではないんですよ、南無妙法蓮華経は。自分自身と別のものではないということです。はい。
わかりました。いや、
ごめんなさい。
こちらこそ。So a very interesting explanation. The true heart, or you might say the true self. As we are chanting, the Reverend Doctor was saying that we are approaching that, you might say, the true heart. Actually, the matter of fact is that what we consider to be our heart, our self, is a result of many preconceptions or conceptions as we experience life. So we have each of us have our own experience. Each of us has an accumulation of experiences which we begin to believe to be ourself and to be our conscious world. But as we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, you might say, work through these preconceptions. And at a certain point, we come to this, you might say, this greater self that is the very bottom of our consciousness. And that is what we begin to approach, working through the different preconceptions and conceptions. As we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, we work through these different layers. And finally, we find this greater self, which again is beyond words, beyond any single word. But as practice continues, we begin to feel and experience its presence.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
日本語で質問したいんですけれども、
どうぞ。
先ほどの対話というか、その南無妙法蓮華経を唱えているときに、そのお釈迦様と自分自身が一体化するっていうふうな説明があったと思うんですけれども、それは深く違う言い方をすると、自分自身との対話というか、自分のなんて言うんでしょう、自分と自分の対話みたいなものにつながっていくんですかね。
おっしゃる通りですね。つまりお釈迦様は何か特殊な心の世界を説いているわけではなくて、心とはこういうものだと極め悟ったわけですね。ですからそれはその人だけに特別なのではなくて、私たちに皆共通するものであると。ですからそういう意味では私たちの本来の私たちとある種対話すると言ってもいいわけです。で、お釈迦様と言いながら別のものが来るのではなくて、それが私であるという、なんと。ここはちょっと分かりにくいかもしれませんけど、なんとそういうことなんです。
ありです。皆さんのために一応質問と答えを集約させていただきます。ありがとうございます。There was a very interesting, very insightful question from Ai-san about the practice of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, she felt that it was, ourself and the Buddha coming together, or it could be, this merging of self and self. And the Reverend said, yes, it is coming together of self and self in the sense of Reverend Doctor is saying that the Buddha is not a particular, extraordinary existence in the sense that the Buddha is, and his realization is a part of us, a part of the world, a part of the mind. His realization is exemplifying the mind which we all share. And therefore, in the practice, we are actually, coming together with our mind, which is actually a part of us. So it's not something so special or extraordinary, but it is very ordinary and a very very connected part of us we come together with that part as we practice.
Great. Any other questions?
Okay, so earlier it was presented that the chanting, like, that's the way to connect to the eternal Buddha. I was just like, out of curiosity, are there any other practices that would like help us connect to Buddha?
Thank you very much. この質問はですね、先生、もちろん南妙法蓮華経によって、高音釈牟尼仏とのコネクションはできますけど、他に、この高音仏とのコネクションを得るための行法はありますでしょうか？
そうですね。クオンの本仏との一体化、それ自体との一体化をはっきり一つになるということの方法としては、多分この世の中にはないと思います。つまりそのような方向に向かっていくものというのはあると思います。ですけれども、クオンの釈迦牟尼仏をはっきりと明示して、そこに向かっていくメソッド、道ですね、を明確にしたものっていうのは、結局これと同じようになってしまうというか、それをすると、なんていうんですかね、つまり南無妙法蓮華経そのものになってしまうという。非常にこれちょっと難しいですけど、私はそれ以外の方法はおそらくそこに多くのものっていうのは向かってはいるかもしれないけど、本当にそこの場所に到達するというものは最終地点、ファイナルディスティネーションに到達する道というのは、現実的にはこれを以外には多分ないと思う。今のところ、少なくとも今のところない。途中まで行くことはできると思います。というのは同じような私という方向に向かっているので、はい、そう言わざるを得ないですね。はい。
通訳します。Well, good observation. And the Reverend Doctor is saying that, there are many practices which are attempting to get to the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha or the eternal Buddha. They are moving in that direction. However, they do not, you might say, get to the final direction. In his opinion, get to the final, destination. Many are heading toward that destination, but very few actually get to the destination. And therefore, he believes that Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the most, at this point in time, the most, you might say, a complete practice to actually arrive at the destination. Many practices will get you somewhere, point you somewhere in that direction. But this, from Reverend's own experience, from Reverend's experience at this point in time, this is probably the most effective method to arrive at the final destination.
パーソナルの質問があります。クラスの後で聞いてもいいですか？
Oh, yes, please.
I realize that a lot of my anxiety and fear and my anger stems from hierarchies, specifically coercive hierarchies. I really don't think that they should exist at all. However, I confuse that with regular hierarchies, and this more relates to my proposal that I have to do. I need to ask someone who is superior, and I am so anxious about it. While the person who I have to interview is not coercive in any way, shape, or form, I confuse that, and I get stuck in this limbo of it's fine, no, it's not fine, it's fine, no, it's not fine, and I'm kind of how do I calm that?
I see. Just a small question to you, sir. Alex, what do you mean by hierarchy? I know we use words just to get a better so I can interpret it.
Is it authority figure?
Hierarchy is a conception, a mental conception, or mental, you might say, pyramid of a kind, a mental.
That
how you conceive of things.
Yes, and however, a coercive hierarchy is when the hierarchy can demand something and it has to be done. For example, like politician to subject, in some cases, teacher to student.
So you might say these are like contexts, yeah? Contexts in which you, okay. I'll try to interpret, and it can be yes, thank you very much for the observation. 斉藤先生、ご本人の質問は、自分の頭の中にいつも何かの関わり、また仕組みによって、いろいろファストレーションとかですね、悩みが生じますですね。で、いかにしてこういう、いろいろ仕組みがあって、関わりがあって、悩みが生じて、いかにそれを、なんでしょうね、本人自身がその落ち着いた心境に戻れるか、一つの悩みですね。何か関わったときは、悩みが発生して、いろいろ不満が発生して、とてもあれですが、嫌な思いがしております。
はい、どうすればいいかということですね。
そうですね。やっぱりいろいろ関わりがあって、仕組みによっていろいろ悩みが生じた場合はどうしたらいいんですかっていう。
仕組みというと。
例えば仕事場の上司と社員、または先生と生徒、そういう仕組みの中に、関わりの中に悩みが発生した場合はどうしたらいいですかっていう。
そうですね。実はそれをここでは一応提示させていただいたようなものなんですが、なぜ南無妙法蓮華経を唱えるというのは、単にそこから逃れるというだけではないんですね。もちろん、ものすごく私たちがその人間関係のいろんな苦しみとか悩みの中にはまり込んでしまうと、平静な時と違って良い発想とか行動が生まれなくなってしまうわけです。ですからそういう意味では平穏な心になるということは大切なんですが、そこで終わるものではなくて、それならばその次にどのようにそこに対処したらいいのか。その人に対してとか、その職場とか、その社会に対してどう自分は対処したらいいのか、あるいはその場合によっては自分自身の心をどのように変わっていけばいいのかという、捉えて変わっていけばいいのかというようなことの力、知恵、それが唱えることを通して生まれてくるということなんです。このことについては非常に心の面での一度は説明をちょっとしたいところなんですが、なぜならば一つは悩み事があると私たちはその悩み事に意識がフォーカスします。フォーカスしますとその悩み事が心全体になりやすい。しかし違う、むしろ私たちはこうだと、私たちの命はこのように輝いているという言葉なり何なり対象の方に意識を集中することができれば、この悩みというのはそんなに大きなものでは実はなくなっていくものです。一つはそれから悩みというものに巻き込まれないだけのものになってくれば、それに対して冷静に考え判断し行動することができるようになる。さらにその行動するための知恵が生まれてくるということも含めて、今実はここでは南無妙法蓮華経を 唱えることをお勧め、いわば提示しているわけなんです。いろんな方法はあるとは思うのですが、簡便にしてやることができるという一つの方法です。原理としてはさっきのようなことが起こればいいと思います。申し上げた説明のようなことがですね。
わかりました。
すみません。なんか。
Very, very interesting. A very good point that you raised, Alex. The Reverend Doctor is saying that, when we have troubles when we're dealing with different situations, different contexts, school, work, etc. We have to, you might say, have the peace of mind and a mind that's also connected with the problem to solve the issue. But the thing is that when our mind is overly focused on that one issue, the mind becomes overwhelmed, you might say, just wholly controlled by that one issue. And at that time, the necessary thinking and the necessary, you might say, emotional mindset too, that can solve the problem will not come because your mind is overwhelmed by the situation. That is why to chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo brings the mind to a different place where there is, you might say, light, and there's the wisdom begins to appear in the mind. So that is why, again, there's many ways of dealing with things, but the Reverend believes that chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo makes that space in the mind that is at this moment when you're confronted with the issue, being overwhelmed by the the information that you are receiving. So that is one way that you might help you in finding the ways to deal with the issues that are in front of you, to create this space in your mind by the chanting of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. That's the Reverend Doctor's advice.
I want to say first, thank you for showing us that meditation. But I was wondering, for the mental process through chanting, is it a one-time thing that you experience, or do you have to experience it multiple times? And if so, because during the first time, I believe that I got to the state of stable mind, and then the second one was released from trauma a little bit from there. But how do we seek the true hearts, and how do we know when we obtain the concentration wisdom, if that makes sense?
Okay. Well, thank you, Brendan. Yes, I'll try to interpret that for you and relay that to the doctor, Reverend Doctor. 斉藤先生、ご本人からの質問は、2回ほどNam-myoho Renge Kyoを体験させていただきまして、で、心の動きというか、先生が図面で描かれた心の動きは、本人が、途中まで行ってる、毎回途中まで行ってる感じ、本人がそう思ってるんですけど、具体的に、最終的に、その目標、何の感じを与えるんですか？で、どういうふうにその目標、つまり、また目的地をですね、到着したっていう、どういうふうにそれ分かるんでしょうかと。本人がどうしてもその目的地まで行きたいんだけど、それどんな感じになるんでしょうかという質問です。はい。途中まで行ってる気がします。
素晴らしい。いや、素晴らしいですね、それはね。非常に素晴らしい。そして最終っていうか、その目的地に到達した時というのは、私という限定がない。私という人間でありながら、無限の世界の中にいるような。ですから、お互いの垣根が、私という限定を超えた、無限のブッダの世界というようなことを本当に実感するようになっていくわけなんです。最終的な。こうなりますと、次に生まれるのが、私以外の彼は私と違う人。でもそうではなくて、本来同じその無限のものを持って っている人たち、しかしどこかでつまずいてる、どこかでその辺が分からなくなってるということに気づき、そういうこともまた相手に対してもなんていうんですか、相手のためにとか、相手があるいはそこが分かってくれることのためにという、そういう気持ち、つまりそれが菩薩の心ですね。私だけでなくて、そういうものが生まれてくるようになるわけです。その先にですね。これが結局ここでもそうですけど、平和な社会を作る大きなね、原動力になると私は思ってるんです。しかも尽きることのない力です。これは。はい。
Yeah, so a very good question. Thank you, Brendan. The doctor was happy that you have made this attempt, and the doctor says that the Reverend Doctor says that when you get to that final destination, at that point, what will happen is that the distinction, the wall between myself and the other person disappears. And also more than, not only that, is that the person, another person, and I, that wall also breaks down. And what comes out from you, what comes out from you at that point is that the desire, hope to do something good for that person, to bring benefit for that person. So here you have also a driving force for peace, because you want to do good, you want to bring peace to others, and this desire does not run dry, because it is at the ultimate destination of the mind. This desire is there. It is a part of that ultimate destination. So, and again, this is something very important if we talk about peace. Yeah.
Thank you very much for chanting for us. I appreciate it. So in our one of our previous meetings, we spoke about different chants that can be used, such as the Tara mantra that was recommended by the Dalai Lama. So what I wanted to ask was if it's a different chant besides the Namu Myoho. Does the Buddha here, is there other chants can be used to reach the Buddha, I guess is what I'm asking.
Thank you. I will relay that to the Reverend Doctor. Thank you. 先生、ご本人の質問は、もちろん南妙法蓮華経がいろいろ教えていただいた感謝してますけど、以前ダイライラマのタラマントラですかっていうお話もあって、で本人の質問は他のマントラというか唱え言葉もあるでしょうか。仏様と一緒になるための行法というか。
それは様々あります。マントラはもう本当にたくさんのマントラが存在するわけです。ですからそういうことですね。様々なマントラが存在する。そしてただそれぞれの根本的なところに何があるかというところは先ほどの永遠のブッダというところにつながるわけですけど、そのある一つ一つのあるその場における一つ一つの現れというかパートというか、はい、それがあるわけですね。それぞれとまた一つになるためのマントラというのが存在する。でもそのもともと究極的にその元のところをたどっていくと、先ほどの永遠のブッダというところに行き着くわけなんですね。だから別に永遠のブッダと別のものではないです。それぞれが。だけれどもその一番根本のところにあるのが何かというところに永遠のブッダがあり、その永遠のブッダを一言で表しているのが南無妙法蓮華経であり、南無妙法蓮華経はではそれらのマントラと別のものかというと、それらのマントラをも含めているわけです、内容的には。というふうに言われているわけなんです。はい。
すいません。ありがとうございます。 So this is a very important comment here. There are many mantras, a multitude of mantras, and each are connected with a certain part, you might say a certain portion, a certain practice. However, all these practices return to one eternal Buddha. Therefore, it is not wrong to practice different mantras because they are important parts. But ultimately, all these parts return to the one eternal Buddha. Therefore, to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, the Reverend believes, and it is taught, that it connects, it is to connect with all the mantras. It is an act of connecting with all the mantras. And this is the Reverend's understanding.
I wanted to extend our deepest appreciation to the Reverend Dr. Daiho Saito. Arigato gozaimasu, sensei. And also for Dean San and Yamamura sensei for being part of this series as well. And one challenge that I wanted you to have is that notice and reflect on the difference in terms of how it impacted you with the way the Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is the Reverend Doctor did his version of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo compared to what we experienced in session 2, right? Those are kind of two different styles of saying the chant. And just write down your, keep up with your journal. So, but anyway, thank you very much, everybody.